Yatae. My name is Shaina Oliver. I am a field organizer with Moms Clean Air Force, as well as I work with EcoMadres and as being an Indigenous advocate for Indigenous people's rights. Moms Clean Air Force is a national organization of over 1 million moms and dads united in fighting for our children's health and environment. Most importantly, I'm a mother of 4, as well as caregiver and wife. And my children and I are descendants of the genocide known as the Indian Removal Act, known to the Diné as the Long Walk of the Navajo. But our history goes a little bit further than that. But moms, we are celebrating Native American Heritage Month, and this is going to be the beginning of highlighting a long series of Indigenous voices on what Indigenous people's rights means to us as Indigenous moms, tribal members, as well as workers in the community. The Indian Removal Act wasn't really created until long after the creation of constitutions and treaties. And it wasn't until 1830 they decided to have this policy in place, even really after the tribes of the Eastern Territories already established their treaties. And in 1788, they established a clause in the Constitution to safeguard tribes' rights, establishing that treaties are the supreme law of the land and still is to this day. So please share our stories and learn from Indigenous perspective and how inclusion of Indigenous people would shape our solutions to the climate crisis that we face today. So now I will begin telling my story. I am Diné. I am born for Bitterwater clan on my mother's side, and I am born for Saltwater clan on my father's side. Because of genocide, I am not fluent in Navajo, so I cannot introduce myself properly in Navajo and give my proper introductions of my clans. So my family's history begins with the story of the Mescalero Apache woman on my dad's mother's side of the family. In the time of the Spanish settlers, before the Long Walk of the Navajo, Navajo is a name given to us by the Spanish, meaning thief, and it was influenced by the Pueblo people as a derogatory name, referring to Diné as field people, since we abandoned the way of adobe homes and communities. Diné people preferred to live nomadic with the lands and with the seasons in balance within the sacred mountains. During the Spanish invasion in the late 1500s to the 1700s, really pushed many tribes to, like the Mescalero Apache, to flee for their lives, as men were brutalized and slaughtered, women were raped and enslaved, and children were slaughtered or enslaved. And those that were pregnant had the fear of their babies being taken from them and turned into slaves. In 1598 is when the colony of New Mexico was founded and created by the Spanish. So the following, after that creation, the invasion really began in southern New Mexico area, starting the decades-long wars between the indigenous people and Spanish settler communities. So during this time, many tribes have fled north to escape the horrors of the invasions of the Spanish, where women like the Mescalero woman who gave up her baby to a Diné family, my family, in northern New Mexico. That's where my family story begins for my grandmother and her family in the Four Corners area near in the southern, just south of Farmington, New Mexico. And she was able to grow up on her ancestral lands and her family, and that area is considered to be Francisco Mesa, where that mesa looks out in all directions of that area. So my grandfather on my dad's family side settled near the river in Shiprock, New Mexico, after returning from the encampment of Bosque Redondo, known as Fort Sumner, New Mexico. And the war with the U.S. didn't really begin until 1849, which continued until 1864, until the surrender of the Dinesh people that led to the long walk to Fort Sumner and 4 years of torture and starvation, which didn't end until 1868 when the army had enough of starving. It was this foreign U.S. government known to tribes as Washington that wanted all tribes to move to Indian territory known as Oklahoma. To the Dinesh people, this was out of the question because we had a strong belief of staying within our sacred boundaries of the 4 sacred mountains that lay in southern Colorado, to the western areas of New Mexico, in the eastern areas of Arizona, and southeast areas of Utah. Many indigenous Dinesh families still live within the sacred mountains. The Navajo Nation, we have one of the most advanced treaties of the U.S. government that has really crippled our health, wealth, and environment on our reservations, which has led to the exploitation of oil, gas, coal, uranium, and many other resources like water. The Navajo Nation's treaty leaves little room for indigenous inclusion or governance. It also has declined the role of women leadership in government and community since U.S. government enforcements and influences. Because of these exploitations, my people have seen the increase in land degradation and health. As indigenous people, we have the highest rates in asthma, heart disease, cancer, mental health, adverse birth outcomes, as well as premature deaths in the general population. Because of the health degradation on the Navajo reservation, our tribal members have really been fighting for the cleanup of uranium mines and the enforcement of protective gear in these type of work environments. Really has been the pivotal influence in the creation of the EPA in 1970. So the Navajo Nation also have started their climate action plan on coal plant closures, where Black Mesa Peabody coal plant was recently closed and demolished. But we still face many barriers that stand in our way of our indigenous rights due to environmental racism and misunderstandings of indigenous governance, which is why we need indigenous inclusion at the core of every problem with governance. To me, indigenous people's rights means indigenous inclusion in education, health, nutrition, employment, housing, and government policy. Without these fundamentals, how can our indigenous people overcome generational trauma or the dysfunctions in our communities? So we need to really think and rethink what it means to be educated, healthy, employed, housed, and governed. So thank you for listening. And I hope this will influence you and inspire you to learn more about indigenous knowledge and self-governance. And I hope you enjoy our series coming soon. And going forward, we will share more indigenous perspectives and voices on indigenous people's rights and climate action. So thank you for celebrating Native American Heritage Month with Moss Clean Air Force.